We will be talking about hyperautomation, investing in resilience without compromising on digital experience, and perhaps also on customer experience, because we have two special guests today. One is Huw Williams. He's a customer experience and customer contact industry expert, 25 years working in operational, technical, and consulting roles. Today, he's helping organizations across all industries to embrace automation in transforming customer and employee experience. I think it fits very well with the discussion that we had last week, where we spoke about the challenge of customer experience in a B2B world. So I may be referring to that, back to that as well during this session. Our second speaker is Amit. Amit, he leads the banking and capital markets industry practice and leads the global efforts to enable UiPath financial services clients to automate their operations using both RPA and AI. And the ones who have been here in the previous session with UiPath probably remember him as well. It was a session where we spoke about RPA and automation in general. This time we bring it one step further, and we're going to talk about hyper automation, what that means, and what the advantages are for organizations, financial services, and what it could bring in terms of resiliency and digital experience. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to start with the very first poll, which is linking back to the first session, RPA, and then looking further to the whole idea of hyper automation. And what I'm curious to know is how familiar you are with those two, those two, how would we call it, techniques. So what I see right now is that it's definitely a topic worth discussing. RPA is pretty known, hyperautomation quite a lot less. So that brings me to the first question. Before we go into the advantages of hyperautomation, I think it's very wise to first look at what hyperautomation actually means. I have an idea about it because you invited me for a webinar a few weeks ago, which discussed exactly that for microfinance institutions. But I'm going to give the word to you now. Perhaps Amit, could you share what hyperautomation means and what the differences are with RPA? And I will go back to you to see if he has anything to add on that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick, for this opportunity, and good evening, everyone who have joined us today. So I think, Rick, I'll take even a step back, and before I see what hyperautomation is, I would talk about why exactly do we need something like hyperautomation, and the reason perhaps is how do we automate journeys, not just processes and tasks. And these journeys are complex client and employee journeys within and transcending financial services firms. And if you look at a journey, let's say it's a client onboarding or client servicing, and my colleague Huw, of course, is a world-class expert on that. You will find that these journeys require documents. These journeys require analyzing data. These journeys have pit stops where you have to engage with the customers as well as internal and external customers. And they also need integrations with the rich ecosystem of applications that exist today. So hyperautomation is an answer to automate those complex client and employee journey. Hence, you need machine learning, document understanding, process mining to find these, what exactly is the true sort of the nature of these journeys itself. And obviously, capabilities to do long-running workflows and APIs. So hyperautomation is an answer rather than, core RPA, which was the initial thought process to look at tasks and processes. Now to even go at a more strategic level to see what are those 5, 10, 15, 20 critical journeys that a bank and a cap market firm is looking at, and how do we rethink, reimagine, transform that journey. And that that exactly is my essence of what hyperautomation is.
Huw, do you have anything to add on? I'm gonna unmute you first.
No, thank you, Rick. I think there's a perfectly positioned, thank you, Amit, from a journey perspective. One of the things that historically in RPA has been seen or perceived as a point solution, that is that's a very old way of thinking in certain terms, because now you have the opportunity from a customer service or customer experience perspective, that customer interacts with your brand before even attempting to contact you, through into the contact center, into the middle, into the back office and beyond. And all of the tooling required to eloquently service that customer, to orchestrate that customer, is way beyond RPA. But what's really interesting is RPA is the enabler to delivering that. And what we're aiming to achieve with hyperautomation is to provide all of the tooling, RPA and other capabilities to drive that end-to-end automation of that customer journey.
So RPA is just part of the whole hyperautomation. And am I correct? If I refer back to the previous session last week, it was about customer experience. And one of my key conclusions was that customer experience is something that should be dealt with on a strategic level. It's not an operational, it's not a technical thing, it's a strategic thing. Is it also a similar thing, a similar parallel that you can make with RPA being more operational, technical, and hyperautomation being something on a strategic level?
I'll take that first, Amit, and then if you want to conclude on it. It is absolutely a strategic, it's a platform, it's a component that sits as part of your ecosystem, not a point solution. It allows you to do two things. It allows you to bring together and act as the glue of all those disparate technologies and data sets that you have within your organization to deliver that outcome, and to do that very, very quickly. It's also, just to add one further point on that, it can also, as well as being a strategic platform, can also still achieve some of those tactical challenges that you have, because it's so agile in the way that you can implement and build. Yeah. So it can achieve both.
All right. Well, I heard it a few times already, and it was also quoted in Gartner. Brian Berg, the research vice president of Gartner, that said that has evolved so much the last few years. And we have seen an evolution, he said, from process automation towards automation at the business ecosystem level. So it's something that you referred to, that Amit referred to. If I hear that, it sounds like a very long project to implement. Is it like a very long project to implement, or is it something that banks should be doing on a step-by-step basis, learning from every step they do to do the next step even better, etc., etc.? How does such an implementation look like?
I mean, I can take a stab at it from my side, Rick. I think it's a classic hyperautomation as a technology or as a technology stack is ripe for an agile implementation. And I think you mentioned that very eloquently, which is that if you look at the MVP, or if you look at the core rethinking or reimagination of the process, can be quickly achieved, quickly implemented. In some cases, even in some cases, it's few weeks itself, and you start to get the funding back to your continuous improvement and your own reimagination perspective. So I would say, Rick, it's gone are the days of 24-month BPM or 36-month ERP implementations. Hyperautomations are much nimbler and much more agile, delivery ready as far as the technology is concerned, just to put that into perspective.
Okay. All right. Huw, is there anything you would like to add on that?
To put a number on that in my area in customer experience, let's look at, for example, a card decline, a customer calling in want to decline, obviously all of the complexities of an agent in a contact center, looking at those different systems and so on, through to either offering additional lending or reporting a fraud, cancelling and reissue a card, lots of activities. So 8 to 12 weeks we would expect to be able to build design, build, and implement at scale within an organization, and to be achieving the outcomes or typical outcomes that you would expect with that automation activity.
Yeah, including the learning of the machine, for example.
Exactly, and not to talk specifically about it from a product perspective, one of the areas that has been most interesting to us from a product perspective is simplicity of design and build. In being able to use out-of-the-box connectors, and being able to reuse components that you've already created, and of course to be able to adapt not only building an automation activity, but how you present that data to agents or other personas within your business. So what a UI could look like, and that's speed of build and design is such a core component of the platform.
One of the elements that we discussed in our first session in July on how automation is making banking more human was also that the programming language is getting more human. Can we make the same parallel to hyperautomation as well? Is it a business-driven thing, or is it still business that needs to talk to IT to make sure that everything is done like they hope it was?
It most definitely applies to hyperautomation as well. And I'll give you two examples. And the second example, I may ask you to elaborate. One of the feature or one of the component of hyperautomation is machine learning. Now, gone are the days when you had to go to a data scientist to create a model, right? I mean, somebody will have to do data preparation, some data engineering, and then, in R or Python, they will have to create a model. The hyperautomation platform allows, I wouldn't say a frontline business team member, but certainly a business analyst or a functional analyst to be able to get the data, train the model using that data, and deploy that model right into the workflow itself. So that is, Rick, to your point in terms of how business is sort of interacting with hyperautomation. Second is even the engagement, which is what we call as UiPath apps. And that's the reason, I would like to tap Huw to sort of elaborate on it in terms of how we can create even those engagement layers in a quick and business-driven sort of promotions. Huw, what do you think?
Thank you, Amit. And I think the selling point is where the industry has been. So bots have been able to do things and are getting better at it and intelligent and having native AI capabilities. So bots are now more capable than ever. What's probably been lacking is how does a human interact and engage with that bot? Because what we don't want to do, and the misconception is, oh, well, a bot can't do that job in a customer service setting because they still want to speak to a human. And that's absolutely the case. What we're saying is you engage that bot, the bot engages with the human in the loop. So in the case of where we've invested and have been investing with apps is to allow similarly the simplicity of building a bot, building a UI that is customizable, that suits the end user, that works how they work, to present data in a way that the bot is pulling and pushing data, and then they're triggering further at downstream activities. Yeah. So the key topic is, in being able to engage that human in such a way that they're empowered with more data, more complexity, but the bot is essentially simplifying how they're getting that data and how they're actioning that request.
Yeah. And is it also capable of acting on those data already, or is that one step further?
No, and that's precise. It again is it creates such an easy framework to then add on to it. And I have many customers who start very, very simply, maybe week one of their project, in maybe just pushing 2 or 3 key pieces of information, and intuitively add those fields and functions to a contact center agent or to a middle office, to be able to intuitively develop that use case.
Cool. I'm gonna go to the next poll now, which fits nicely on this discussion. It is about how the organizations in our audience are already automating their process, and not how, to what extent are they dealing with it already, both RPA and hyperautomation. And my feeling is that these discussions, they remain very technical very often, isn't it? It's very hard to get hyperautomation sexy and get it out of the hype for a business oriented audience. Is that a similar experience that you have? When I look at the webinars for hyperautomation or RPA, for example, it's very often about how to program, how to deal with this, how to deal with that. But the essential discussions are pretty rare, it seems.
That is always a risk with new technology.
Yeah, exactly.
The newness of the technology or the novelty of the technology often attracts people.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing quite a lot of business teams embracing this, and it's more than just because it's a new technology, but because it solves real problems, so to say.
All right. Yeah. If I look at, I'm gonna show the results of the poll. You see that the RPA that has matured already, and more organizations are building on that. The idea of hyperautomation, the one step further, is still lagging compared to RPA. And that brings me to next question for Amit. Would you consider financial services as front runners in this field, or are they lagging also compared to other industries?
I would so actually, if you would have asked this question 6 months or 9 months back, I wouldn't have a lot of data to talk about it. I mean, it'll all be sort of empirical or anecdotal. Bain Consulting published its survey after COVID hit, and they came up with the fact that 90% of financial services firms are accelerating their automation efforts. Rick, to your point,
Yeah.
And I think there are reasons behind why financial services firms have to do it. It's not a choice. The interest rate regimes are really bad. I mean, people are talking about negative interest rates, so the interest related income is under pressure.
Yeah.
Pandemic has ensured that the operating model is hit really, really badly. I mean, people are maintaining two types of infrastructures, work from home infrastructure as well as the office infrastructure. So the costs are under a lot of pressure. And unfortunate scenario is that economic recovery is very slow. So their end customers are going to face a lot of loan, recovery and collections kind of issues as well. So financial services have no choice here, and they are embracing hyper automation across all the three levels. I spoke about journeys, processes, and even the task level automation, which can be given to their employees at scale, so that they have attended automation on their desktop for them to be made more productive and more compliant in more controlled manner. So long-winded answer to your point, Rick. There is enough evidence that financial services firms are globally, without perhaps any exception, are kind of leading the charge as far as hyperautomation is concerned.
Excuse me? Are
leading the charge as far as hyperautomation is concerned.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If you look at the pace at which banks need to react in the crisis for example, lending and requests from their customers, etc., I can imagine that the ones that have embraced the advantages of this kind of technologies, they were the ones who, at least in the beginning, probably were the most favored.
There's actually a very good example how hyperautomation is creating the disparity between those winners who went for hyperautomation versus the other. As you know, a lot of the governments gave grants for these banks to give it to small and medium business owners.
Yep.
Now, those banks, especially on the state side, and I'm sure this happened in Europe as well, is which were able to automate those processes, the newly instituted processes, they were able to get a larger market share. So not only they have now a lot of loans on their balance sheet that they have been able to originate, they also have been able to extract or get more new clients from the other banking units or banking firms. And as a result of that, certainly you have this winners versus losers kind of a dispersion, where automation is giving them that advantage in the competitive landscape.
Yeah, and that's what this title was all about: resiliency without compromising on digital experience.
That's right.
Huw, is there any examples that you could bring in this discussion?
I think one of the real interesting points for us is the term automation in customer experience in my area is that it's a very visible, very customer-centric part of their business. And traditionally, automation has played a very it's been a back office and a very hidden technology. Many customers that we see have some nervousness to bringing this into a real-time area, real-time part of their business. And obviously the acceptance to using automation as a core part of customer interaction, it's a challenge in some cases to persuade and to encourage. The reality of that is, once these are in standard parts of everybody's working day, and I think the point Amit made around task level automation, really it is, how do you influence how somebody does their job at a very basic level? How do you present data to them and assist them? Once that particular challenge is realized, then it's a natural way forward and a very keen shift for customers to make this leap into automation at scale.
Yeah. And well, this automation, how long do you think it will take before the majority of banks will embrace this automation at scale? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, I worked in a bank until 2 years ago, and when I thought about RPA, we were talking about a stupid chatbot. We were not talking about the big integrations that makes a bank resilient. For me, resilience goes further than being capable of answering people's questions on a minute. That's not resiliency for me. So how long does it take before banks will embrace it, really?
So I would say the window for the banks is actually much, much shorter now. I think if you look at the digital agenda, people were thinking that 2020, next 24 to 36 months could be a digital, automation or digital process automation at scale is something that most of the banks were thinking, right? I mean, across different regions. I think that window is closing. People are pulling in those targets. I would say next 12 to 18 months are very hot in terms of pushing the pedal. Already the budgets are realigning themselves to ensure that it's hyper automation focused, along with, of course, digital and digital experience, combined to it. But and the real scare or the risk is, as I was saying, that winners versus losers. I think losers have a much more at stake now if they, sort of don't embrace it at such an accelerated pace. That's my personal opinion based on what I'm seeing working with our large clients here.
Means there's a bright future for UiPath in the coming years.
for the I would say for the entire hyperautomation industry, yeah.
Yeah. If there would be like 1 or 2 departments within a bank that you would consider being capable of grasping most of the opportunities of hyperautomation, where would you look at?
I'm going to start with my area, which is customer experience, and I'll let Amit answer the rest of them. I'll give 2 very simple reasons. The contact center, which is high volume. It is, if you look at it in terms of age, in terms of employee numbers and all sorts of varieties of different, it's a huge cost center to banking, and it doesn't necessarily add the value that they would traditionally expect. So it's very reactive. It's the types of use cases that exist. It's almost an admin function. There is a clear and has been a clear requirement for some time to pivot the role of that contact center from a cost center to a profit center. But always there's been the challenge of the legacy architecture that sits within banking, the challenge of risk, and a variety of other compliance and other issues. What we now have is an opportunity with hyperautomation, with using a platform at scale to accelerate the role of an agent, pivot them away from what is traditionally today an inbound admin function to provide that kind of personal banking experience, right the way through to being able to assure compliance and drive many other areas around customer experience, and also recognizing in the very competitive market that banking today is, that customer experience is a differentiator for many customers who are very mobile and able to migrate and move between different brands. So being able to instill that experience. So it does, that function is a clear one, obviously, for me. At scale, it's value driven, and of course will deliver a much more larger outcome. Amit, I'm sure there's other departments that you feel are worthy of similar investment.
Before going to Amit, I would like to add on that, because another conclusion, sorry, Amit, I'll come back to you right away. There was another conclusion last week, which was about customer experience. And the lady, she said, digital experience is not so much, it's about convenience. Customer experience is not. Convenience is very easy to copy. Customer experience is a strategic thing that can really make a difference. If we take that back into your answer, how would Hyperautomation build on that?
Personalization, in simple terms. We all buy from e-commerce and high-tech businesses who know what we want to buy next. But if I still contact my bank, they can ask me who I am and how can I help. It slaps in the face of, you have that data in your business to unlock. So how Hyperautomation can help is bots can retrieve that data far quicker. It can add AI and predict the likely outcome or next best action. It can then assure and provide all of that information and empower that agent with that personalized and engaging interaction, so that that experience that you'd expect in your branch when you're familiar with the people who work in it, you get that when you call a contact center or any of those touch points, because that individual is empowered with that accelerated data feeds and they can act on that immediately. So allowing personalization, and that's the differentiator, and will naturally instill brand advocacy in many customers.
Right. Amit, what's your favorite department for Hyperautomation?
I mean, I think Huw was spot on when he said contact center. The only way I could add to that would be to include all channels and all customer-facing personnel. I think for long we have ignored any customer-facing function to be, given the hyperautomation or access to hyperautomation, being focused primarily on the operation side. So, contact center, of course, is a major chunk of it. You also have branch bankers, you also have relationship managers, teams supporting these, channel teams, and they are the ones who are facing your client. They are the face of the bank when it comes to opening the account, doing the account servicing, advice, etc. So that would be a major chunk, in my opinion, as definitely that should be, executives should be looking at as far as that.
Yeah. As you were talking, I also thought back about another session from ABN AMRO, who is currently working from branch banking to video banking to, for example, sell their mortgages. Their idea is that from now on, we're going to talk to our customers online. And one of the advantages is that if the customer has a question on his investments, we can instantly click to another advisor. But of course, in the future, AI will help us optimize our advice, because the computer can instantly add on the knowledge of the customer, etc. In the webinar that I attended on microfinance institutes, the big advantage of Hyperautomation that came up there was requests for credits, for example, and to facilitate, to make it easier and to make it a lot faster. That's, I think, definitely also one, and it's a lot further integrated in the whole process of a bank.
Completely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's
it's a great question, actually, that's been posted in my
exactly. Shall I give him the word? I will unmute him. He loves to have the word. So, Andrew.
Sorry, Rick, I had my my mic on mute there. Hold on, I'll put the video. Yeah, so as you can see by the monsters behind me, fear is one of the things one of the biggest resistors to change that I come across in any organization. Fear of change of anything. It's a common problem. And automation, a lot of organizations, the very first thing that they think of with automation is, great, we've got 1,000 contact center staff. How many can we cut that down to? 50, 100? And that untrue myth, because I don't think it's true that automation is all about reducing all the staff. I personally believe it's about giving the staff superpowers. Huw was just mentioning about enabling the staff by putting information in front of them. But the staff don't hear that. They hear automation. I'm going to lose my job. How you guys deal with that? How do you advise the organizations to deal with that? Do you get involved in the human element of the change management? And full truth from you guys, does automation, and particularly automation, geez, can't get my tongue around that, does it result in job losses in those departments?
Let me give you two examples. I'll give you the first one, and I'll be very candid here. The instant metric in my world is average handling time. It's obviously the amount of time. Let's compress it, and the bottom line is the reduction in headcount. That's precisely not what we want to suggest. What we want to suggest here is what hyperautomation does is enables you to upskill essentially your resource to do far more with less. So you're able to take on a much more broader role. You're able to drive personalization, have a much more intimate relationship with your customer, be focused around them, and freeing up that agent away from their role. And I'll give one classic metric. An average contact center, when you look at their entire call talk time, 30% of that time is silence. That's the agent looking for things or doing things, not engaging with the customer, not having the conversation. Imagine that in a branch setting. Imagine that in a face-to-face setting. And what we're suggesting here is freeing up that agent to do more higher value work. And the second example I want to give is one of our customers was launching a new UI enabled by a bot in their contact center. And one of the newer ways that we approach this is to have a lot of feedback from agents in the design. How would you like this robot to assist you? What would make your job easier? And in doing so, we're able to really design some quite compelling, it drives the right outcome, the right behavior. And in that particular instance, the one I'm referring to, there wasn't a huge communication about this pilot. And what happened over time is the ripples of people having this assistant, and they were seekers asking, can I please have this robot? It's going to help me do my job. It's going to help me have a much more engaging, because the bottom line is, in the customer experience scenario, the people who are in that industry want to help customers, want to service them more effectively, don't want to apologize for having so slow systems and not being able to answer their question. So it's about involving them in the process and helping to realize, quite frankly, what it's doing is it's just helping them to serve their customer better and be more value to the organization.
So it's actually using the employees to advocate the acceleration of adoption, as opposed to them perceiving it as something being done to them, to rather involve them so that they're the ones who are telling their peers, you got to get this, you got to get on this, because, oh man. But and do the organizations generally do that, or do they go and do the secret squirrel, we're going to plot it away with the senior management in the back rooms, and then bang, we're going to...
Gone are the days, Andrew. Gone are the days. I'm working with a couple of large banks. One bank has started something called CFO Challenge, which is basically to gamify and democratize these ideas. It's almost like the way Japanese majors used to evangelize continuous improvement that would come float upward. You will find associates, interns, analysts coming up with the ideas. And some of those ideas, as Huw mentioned, those are completely non-productive parts of their org because they want to be redeployed. They want to do value-added stuff. They want to do analytics. So, and if as an FP&A analyst, I would rather do analytics rather than creating and doing data reconciliation. So I would automate the data reconciliation part of it and actually create new models. And there are obviously, there is a disparity in terms of what each firm is doing, but largely firms have figured out that until unless it's a employee first and employee gamification and democratization of those ideas, these changes are hard to come by.
Good to hear. I'll give you the word back there again, Rick.
All right. Well, the subtopic of today was investing in resilience without compromising digital experience. We've touched upon that, of course. But what would you consider the key reasons how hyperautomation is making a bank more resilient? Do you look rather at the fact that a bank can keep operating even if customers would not be available, or is it something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not even a choice, frankly, Rick. I mean, you have risk today. You look at the world today. You have less number of footfalls in your branches. In some cases, your branches are not operational. Contact center went through a pandemic sort of a spike. It is still going through the spike. It's no longer even an afterthought. It's actually on top of your list in terms of how do you ensure that your infrastructure, applications, processes, and journeys are viable on a day-to-day basis. And essentially, we need to put it in the fabric itself. And it is expanding. It's going beyond just the customer servicing itself. I think even simple things like sales prospecting. A wealth manager would sit with the prospect and explain him or her what are the options. Gone are the days of in-person meetings. So they have to use Zoom. At the same time, they also have to use other tools in Hyperautomation for them to send a proposal up front so that they can have this in-person video call, so to say. So Rick, my one-line answer, it's no longer a choice. It's a necessity for you to put automation in the fabric of your processes to ensure that there's this both scale and elasticity, so that tomorrow when the lockdown happens in your region, God forbid, things are working and you at least have a viable business model out there.
So it's about making sure that the businesses keeps running if people are not capable of getting connected.
Spot on. Continuity. It's a business continuity issue now at this point of time.
Huw, is there anything you would like to add on this?
Just on the topic of resilience, full stop. I think one of the things we need to recognize, and I'm going to speak more broadly here, is how banking, in particular in my area in customer experience and contact center, are looking at alternative ways to drive and to maintain that resilience. Is that offshoring? Is that outsourcing? Is that potentially beefing up more home working? There's so many different models that are available to do that.
Yeah.
And seeing automation as a core component in that, it's kind of, because of it's traditionally been perceived as let's just pre-fill out a form, or let's drive some efficiency, let's remove some cost, instead of all of the capabilities that hyperautomation can now bring. It's how do you position, or how do you best position that as a resilient solution within your business, or to drive resilience? And that's true to say. And what we've seen during COVID is many examples of businesses who have to completely change their operating models as a result. And a large portion of them are now building an automation platform into that new operating model to enable them to become more resilient in the future.
All right, Amit, with your global view on automation and financial services, if there is, what's going on? If there's one example that you would like to highlight to convince the audience about the opportunities of hyperautomation, which one would that be?
Yeah, it's a tough one in terms of, I may not be able to name the client per se. However, at the same time, what I would say is that if you look at anything to do with documents, anything to do with structured, unstructured, semi-structured documents, I think opportunities across the globe, across the regions, banks are embracing it very fast because they did have document digitization on their agenda, but certainly because humans can't handle faxes, they can't, access the paper, and obviously, pandemic has made everything completely topsy-turvy. Document digitization is very high on agenda and something that banks are trying to leverage hyperautomation on day one itself. In addition to, of course, contact center and customer servicing being, some of the other journeys as well. Just to, if there was one opportunity, Rick, that I'm looking at from the market perspective.
You, could you give us one example
of the ability to drive unstructured and structured data?
a real revenue generator or cost cutter of hyperautomation in financial services?
Well, revenue generating for me is simple. Is that driving personalization, understanding your customer more to be able to essentially get back to the days when you had that branch personalized understanding, intimate understanding of that customer. That's filtered and ebbed away. Everybody has a very clinical experience typically when not just ringing or calling, but across all channels. Revenue generating opportunity would be to ensure personalization, to be able to find the most suitable and appropriate products for your customer to match that need and demand. And the final point is together with that to assure and drive further compliance, because one of the areas obviously is to drive revenue, yet ensure compliance, and automation is perfectly placed to support and ensure that any potential risk, things like KYC or anything else, can be met and supported in the right way.
Yeah, to make sure that the onboarding processes go easier and better documented, and
because I guess that's it. That could discourage some banks to want to potentially drive more revenue opportunities with their customers. But now, obviously, having the assurance and reducing the risk of any breach of compliance whilst they are actively promoting their brand or services.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. That brings me to the last poll, and definitely worth a discussion as well. No matter where you are on the journey, what are your pain points when you look at hyperautomation, RPA? Is it the sponsorship support to expand the use of automation techniques, not enough resources, or unaware of process to automate? Can I give it a few more seconds? Surprisingly, sponsorship is not part of the answers thus far. That means that there's a big cash cow here, a big business opportunity. The main pain points are not enough resources to scale the automation journey and unaware of process to automate. Does it surprise you as much as it surprises me?
Personally, it doesn't surprise me, and I mean, I can quickly comment on how we are trying to address these 2 points. If that helps, Rick. I think the first point, not enough resources, something that we as an organization figure out very early in the game, and essentially that's a reason from UiPath perspective, learning automation is free, available to everyone on our UiPath Academy. There are hundreds of thousands of people who have come in and have reskilled themselves. And the second part, which is that also is a challenge that we actually figured out very early in the game, and that actually resulted in we acquiring a process mining organization called Process Gold, which is now part of UiPath Hyperautomation platform, so that it allows the business users to be able to highlight and be aware of some of the journeys and the pain points and the bottlenecks that could eventually become opportunities for process automation. So that's how we are addressing it. But I'm not uniquely sort of, I don't think this is unique to this group. I think those two challenges keep on repeating themselves across the landscape.
And not sponsorship.
Sponsorship, yeah, I think COVID has got to do something with it. Looks like, I mean, that's my personal opinion. I would let audience to sort of comment on it, but I think because of what happened in the last 6 to 8 months is getting executives to stand up and sort of give the thumbs up to automate and ensure the resilience in the fabric. That's how I put it, but open to interpretation.
All right, Huw, I think that with this session, we already helped the audience with being unaware of which process to automate. Did you also think that this would be one of the main answers? Because for me, which process to automate sounds like such a easy question.
It's actually, I spend majority of my time answering that question.
Okay.
And it's because of which level the challenge is at. So let's look at my world in terms of a department or function. Typically the question is asked is from a C level, it's we need to automate the contact center, or we need to automate a customer interaction. And then typically a process is picked out, but that process is a component of, do you drive the efficiency? Is it just fingers and toes? So to then try and identify all of the sequence of activities, tasks, activities, and process that require automating to drive that efficiency and to deliver the effectiveness is a huge task. So the first thing is the mindset of approaching the problem and how to emulate a human, essentially. And then obviously the second one is to prioritize the investment and then how and which to build first, and so on and so forth. And that's really where the largest challenges around speed of deployment and scaling really lies, not in the technology anymore, and certainly not in the adoption of human interaction with bots.
Yeah, definitely one of my key conclusions of this session as well. As we are reaching 5 o'clock, I would like to thank you guys very much. I would like to apologize for not sticking to my basic list of questions that I sent beforehand, but I think we had a lovely discussion here. And for me, it's a lot clearer, and I'm pretty convinced for the audience as well. So thanks a lot. And before I leave you all, I'm gonna quickly show the agenda for the upcoming weeks. And that should be on the next slide. So next week, we take a short break. And then on November 19, we invite the General Manager Digital and also Transformation of KBC to answer the unanswered questions that came up during our summer event with Chris Skinner. So it's going to be an interactive session, I think, at the right time as well, because they announced this week that they implemented Apple Pay, for example. And they're doing a lot more interesting stuff in the digital space. And then a week later, we have the Chief Digital Officer of Van Lanschot Kempen, where we're going to discuss the whole evolution of digital and innovation in wealth banking. And we're going to investigate what the main drivers for innovation are there. Is it really creating more quality for the existing customers or reaching out to more customers, and what drives those dynamics? Then we have another session where I cannot give you a topic yet. And then we close on November 10 with Andrew Verster. It's going to be a 1.5 hour long session talking about all the monsters and myths in innovation. And this time we will also have a few giveaways for the most engaging people in the session. And it's going to be a really big conversation. I will probably not be moderating it, but it will be Andrew who's moderating it. Not sure whether he already knew, but by this, Andrew, you will be the moderator of December 10th.